lovely creative quilting friends. Welcome back. It's 2 o'clock, day 18 of our shelter at home, and it's a cold, snowy day in Colorado today, getting lots of snow, but it's really beautiful. It cannot be Easter without snow, so at least that way it still felt like Easter yesterday. For as long as I can remember as a little girl, getting that spring Easter dress from grandma that she would make for us every year, or dresses I would make as I got a little older for Easter. All you're just so ready for spring and the sleeveless dresses, and it always would snow on Easter morning. So anyway, it did feel like Easter in that aspect yesterday. So I hope you all had a great weekend and a good holiday with your families, as much as you could in these days. So today I would love to talk about quilt bindings because that's what I happen to be working on today. I have a couple of customer quilts that need bindings, and that is a service that I do offer. Most people just have me do the quilting, come pick up their quilts, and they put the binding on themselves. But I do have a few people that like for me to do that binding work for them, because then they come pick up their quilt and it's all completely done. They don't even have to go home and do anything to it. So when I do a quilt binding for customers, I always sew the binding on both sides with the machine. When I do my own quilt bindings, I only sew onto the machine on the one side and then flip it over and do it by hand on the other side. So I'm hoping tomorrow that I will maybe have one of those ready for you, that I can show you the hand stitching on the back that I do for my bindings. But for today, I am doing machine bindings, and so I thought I would show you some tips on that. First of all, when I cut my strips of binding, I absolutely love this ruler. I'm going to turn it around here. This is called, it's a big, huge ruler. It's called a Stripology ruler, and it's made by Creative Grids. I know most quilt stores probably carry these or could at least order it for you. And the reason that I like this is, see all these lines right here? Those are actually slits. They're actually cutting areas in the ruler. So the really great thing is, I'm going to tip you down here and flip around over here to my fabric. And so what I can do is lay this on the fabric and line up this bottom edge, and then line up this edge on the zero. I usually line it up a little bit past so that I can square that up. Have this line completely flat with that. And then, sorry to get my rotary cutter, then I can cut. And the nice thing about having these grooves to cut in is that I can even do it with my left hand. So I cut this zero, cut it at the zero. Now I always cut my binding strips at 2.5 inches. So these have 1, 2, 3, and then in between it also has the half. So this actually has cutting lines at every 1/2 inch increment. So I'm going to cut it at, I cut it at the 0, and I'm going to cut it at the 2.5, and then the 5, and then the 7.5, and so on. So you kind of get the picture there. Let me just cut a couple more while I have it down here, because that's the nice thing about it. It's so slick that I have almost all my strips cut with this one pass. This one, I think I'm going to need a little bit more than, I think I can only get 5 out of here. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, I got 7. That's great. So I got 7. So you see, like that, they're all done. But I think I need 9 for this one. So I'll have to cut a couple more in a minute. But I want to move on, because what I want to tell you next is, how did I figure out that I needed 9 strips for my quilt? So get my little handy dandy calculator. This quilt is 84 one direction plus 85 the other direction. So I got 84 by 85, and then I have that again to go around. So I could either add, so it came to 169 add that again, or just do ×2. And that gave me 338 inches. So now I divide that by the width of my strips, which is, I usually go with 40 inches because I cut the selvages off. And then I also, I'm going to sew it at a 45-degree angle. So that's going to take up a little bit extra. So I'm only going to count 40 inches. So divide this 338 by 40. And that gives me 8.45. So 8.5 strips. So that's why I said I need 9 strips for this next quilt that I'm doing. So then you line up, or you're going to cut, like I said, cut the selvages off. And then you're going to sew a 45-degree angle. So the way you do that, imagine my selvages aren't on here. Okay. And then I'm going to actually start here and sew into the corner. Okay. So then when I have that seam sewn, then it'll open up, you know, this direction with that 45-degree angle. I think the reason that you want to do that, let's see if I have, does this one have the seam in it? No, of course not. Well, the reason that you want to do that is because when the binding goes around your quilt edge, your seam will go this way instead of this way, right on top of itself. Okay. Then also when I press it, I'm going to press that seam open because that'll be even less bulk. If you press it to one side, like we normally do with our quilt blocks, then you're going to have more bulk. So press that seam open, and then you're going to press the entire, after you have all 9 of those pieces sewn together, you're going to press it in half this way at the iron. Okay, so we'll press that. And also the first end, after I press that, I'm also going to press it a 45-degree angle at the very beginning of my quilt. And I'll show you that on this other quilt over here, why I did that, because then it makes it easier. I sew that at 45 degrees and then cut off the tip of it, leave a little bit of a fold there. Okay. So then I'm going to go over here to my sewing machine. I'm going to tilt you down there. I think you can see my area that I'm sewing at. Okay. So I have this binding in here now. So you can see I'm now, like on this one, this is the front of the quilt up here. This is the back of the quilt. I'm sewing the binding because I'm going to do this by machine. On the other side, I want to sew it to the back of the quilt first. If I was putting this quilt on, doing the binding by hand afterwards, then I would put it onto the front. Okay, now I cut my strips at 2.5 inches, remember, folded them in half. Now when I'm sewing it onto the quilt, I'm sewing it at 3/8. And then I want to show you, I'm about to get to the corner. Remember when I was talking about 1/4 inch seams and I said this 1/4 inch foot has little red markings on it? If you can see the red markings on here, but there's a red mark on the foot right in front of the needle. So I'm going to use that as my guide where to stop at the end in the corner. So I'm going to stop when the edge of the quilt here, this edge that I'm coming up to, lines up with that mark. Actually, just a little bit before it, because I'm doing 3/8, not 1/4. Then I turn my whole, lift up the presser foot, okay, turn the whole quilt so that now the very corner of the quilt here is pointing towards me. So then I'm going to put the foot back down and stitch right out into the corner. Okay. And when I'm sewing my binding on, I always leave my needle in the down position if I can, because that helps me know where to turn. And then when I'm flipping the quilt around, moving, if that needle stayed in there, it won't get lost where it's at. Okay, so I don't know if you can see how I sewed that into right into the corner. Okay, so now I'm going to flip this around. See if I can get this where you can see. Okay, so here is where I just sewed into the corner, and I'm going to come back down this side. So I'm going to flip this tail straight up. So it's going to make a 45-degree angle right where we sewed into the corner. That really helps do that. So now I have it flipped straight up. So this is all even, the edge of the quilt and that edge of the binding. Now you're going to grab this tail of the binding and bring it back down. Okay. Can you see how that looks? Now I'm going to go right back up, but put this right up to the needle. My needle's still in the down position. Line up this edge with 3/8 and take a couple stitches, and I actually back stitch a couple on that one as well. So I'm going to go keep sewing at 3/8. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to do a couple back stitches. Okay, now I'm going to show you. I'm going to turn you around this way a little bit more. Okay, so here's the edge of my quilt. And here's that tail. That's going to be the end. And here's the beginning tail. So here's what I was talking about with pressing that at a 45-degree angle and then trimming it off. So now I have, this is where my seam is going to be when I put these two pieces together. Okay, so you lay this flat on the quilt. Okay, and then you're going to you're going to open up this one that you have already cut your 45-degree angle, and you're going to lay that right inside the end tail that's coming up here. Fold that back over. Okay, see how that's going to make a nice seam right there? But how are we going to sew it? I will show you. So now you're going to hold it where it's at as best as you can. I mean, you really have to hold it in the right place. Then we're going to go inside this one and inside this one. So I say you're going to go inside of the inside one, inside of the one that's inside. Okay, keep opening that up and really pinch it so it doesn't move anywhere. Okay, so this is the seam that we have to sew right here, but we got to sew it inside here. So without moving anything, we're going to flip and get in there. Okay, we're going to flip this there. Okay, now you have the perfect line to sew on because you pressed that. You're going to sew right where you had pressed it. So we're going to stick a pin in it right there and then press that. Okay, so that's how you join the end and the beginning. Now I want to show you on this corner how we folded this again in case you couldn't see it. Okay, flipped it up, flipped it back over. And so now you have this little triangle-y pocket. So I'm going to show you when we go to flip that around, when I'm going to sew this down, it's going to make a really nice mitered corner there and on that side as well. So now that I have it all machine pieced down on this side, now I'm going to go back around, and you can see how sewing it at 3/8, it just lined up perfectly. Now I'm going to go back and with the machine and stitch that down. So that's how I'm going to finish off this binding by machine. And that's it. That's all that I wanted to show you guys today. And I will see you tomorrow. Like I said, I'll try to have, this is the back for the quilt. Remember my swoon quilt that I was putting binding on, or borders on last week? Sorry, that was loud. This is the back. I didn't have enough of the red, so I'm adding in some strips of white. I got to do one along the top and one along that side, and then it'll be done. So I'm excited about that. I will try and get that ready to put the binding on so that I can show you guys how to do a hand binding tomorrow. So be continuously creative, keep on quilting, show me what you're working on, and I'll show you what I'm working on tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Bye.